We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg, and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and show you some tips and tricks down the line. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information. We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg, and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and show you some tips and tricks down the line. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information. We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg, and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and show you some tips and tricks down the line. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information. We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg, and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and show you some tips and tricks down the line. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information. So you're planning to build your first epoxy table. Where do you start? So you're planning to build your first epoxy table and you don't know where to start. In this first part video, we are going to be discussing preparation, designing, and how to build your mold for your epoxy table. And within the next few weeks to come, we are going to launch video number 2, where we will be going into detail on how to cast your epoxy, curing times, sanding, and the finishing and oiling stages of your epoxy table. Now, before you continue watching this video, there's another video I posted about 2 weeks ago where I went into much more detail on epoxy mistakes. You might want to go and check that out and then continue watching these videos. And the next bit of information I want to share with you, it's now September 2021. In October, our DIY with Greg website will be live. What does that mean? It means that all our previous projects we posted on YouTube, drawings will be available for you to download, and for all our future projects to come. But I have some very exciting news I also want to share with you. I am currently drawing up a complete information data sheet. Every single thing you need to know on how we build all our epoxy tables, where I will be going into intense detail, every single thing you need to know from start to finish. And I will be sharing all my knowledge, research, and experience with you, putting it on a data sheet for you to download. You want to make sure to follow us on all our social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook. I will be leaving a link down in the description where you can find us. We will be obviously announcing once our website is live on our social media platforms. Without any further delay, let's get into today's project. And the absolute first thing you want to do is to make sure that your wood is properly dried. What do I mean by this? You need to make sure there's no moisture inside your slabs. Now, I did make a video last week going into a lot of details on moisture content in your slabs. I am going to leave a link now. You need to go and check that video out first before you continue watching this video. Those steps I'm explaining in that video is insanely critical before you build your first epoxy table. So now that we know our slab is dry, we're going to move to the next step. And that's by making sure our slab is flat on top and at the bottom. What do I mean by this is, in the drying process of a slab, natural cracks will occur and your slab will twist and bend by itself. This is the drying process. And there's 2 ways you can flatten your slab. I will leave a link now where we built a previous table and built a router sled where you can do this manually. Or luckily for us, we are in a fortunate position of having a supplier close by where we take all our slabs to be flattened on a CNC machine. Now that we know our slab is dry, then we're going to move on to the next step by removing all the bark. What do I mean by this is, you want a strong bond between your epoxy and your wood, and the bark is going to prevent a strong bond between your wood and your epoxy. We use a chisel and a hammer to remove all the bulkier pieces of bark on our slab. And then we're moving to wire steel brushes. Now, we like to use Torcraft brushes. There's 2 brushes I would recommend. The first brush is a very aggressive brush. This will remove 95% of your bark. But it will also make small little lines on your live edge. That's why we are moving to the second steel wire brush. This is a less aggressive steel wire brush. And this will remove all the markings your first wire brush has made on your live edge. Now that we know our slab is dry, it's been flattened and all the bark has been removed. Now we're going to move to the designing part of your table. And this is the part of the project we absolutely love. It's to see your epoxy table comes alive. There's 3 methods you can use in designing your epoxy table. The first method is building a frame to the exact size your finished table is going to be. And then you can place it over your slab and get a good idea of how your end product will look. The second method is using your computer, Photoshop for instance, and cut your slab on the computer and place it in the direction you would like your epoxy table to be, and then you can have a good idea of how your end product will look. The third method is the one we like using the most, and having your mold already cut to the table's final size, and placing your slab on top of the table and marking on the slab with a black marker. Remove your slab and then you have a good idea of how your table will look. Let me show you how we do it. So this is basically how it's going to look like and the method we like using in designing our tables. So we will send a picture like this to our clients and get their approval. But this is basically how it looks. So I sent this design to our client and they absolutely loved the design. Now it's time to move on by cutting our slab. That's a very easy part. You can use your plunge saw, your track saw, or in my case, I'm just using my circular saw. Now we're going to move to the last section of this video, and that's building a mold for your epoxy table. We like to use white melamine wood to build the molds for our epoxy tables. And as you can see in front of me, this mold is way too big for the epoxy table we're building. Why are we doing this? As an epoxy manufacturer, we can't cut individual sheets for every single table because we can use this sheet 3 to 4 times. And why we like to use this wood is the epoxy can't penetrate into the wood due to the sheet it's got on top of the chipboard. Now you can use superwood, but then you have to buy the tape. So your epoxy is not going to penetrate into the wood. I'm going to explain to you how we build our molds for all our epoxy tables. The first tip I want to give you is always build your mold slightly bigger, lengthwise and widthwise. Why do we do this? If you're going to build a mold to the exact finished size of your table, there's absolutely no room for error. That's why we build our molds a little bit bigger so we can cut our table to its final size later on. The next tip I want to give you is the side walls you're going to put up for the epoxy table. You need to build them slightly bigger than your slab. If you're going to do a deep pour and the epoxy is going to run over the slab, this is going to prevent your epoxy from falling out. Another thing I want to share with you, when you're going to put up the side panels, always apply a layer of silicone in this corner. This is just to prevent the epoxy from leaking out. Now the other question we also receive a lot is, what are we using to apply on the white melamine sheet? And it's called ram wax. It's just a very thin layer of wax you need to apply to your melamine sheet, and this is going to prevent your epoxy from aggressively sticking to the white melamine sheet. So this is basically how you build a mold for your epoxy table. I am going to leave a link now of a previous table we built where you can see how I built the mold for the epoxy table.
Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Greg and welcome to the second part of how I built this absolutely beautiful epoxy table. I am going to leave a link now. If you want to go and check out part 1, you absolutely have to go and check out part 1 to fully understand where we come from and how to build the epoxy table. So I'm just apologizing in advance. We recently invested in a new camera, and between the old camera and the new camera we did unfortunately lose some footage, and the footage we lost was basically from part 1 to part 2, where we took this epoxy table out of the mold and took it to our CNC supplier to flatten the slab. That's the footage we lost, unfortunately. I do apologize for that. But continuing with the video, the specific epoxy I'm using, I can only cast about 10 to 12 mils at a time. So for this specific project, we done a total.
We've been building epoxy tables for many years now, and we are finally going to share all our methods and techniques with you. My name is Greg and I am going to show you how to build the perfect epoxy table. I'm going to show you all the tools you need, exactly how to use them, and show you some tips and tricks down the line. Everyone thinks you need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has set. That's not true. You need to cast your second layer of epoxy once your first layer has become tacky. This masterclass has been designed for all woodworkers, from your beginner all the way up to your experts. Click on this video or in the description down below for more information.
Of 4 pours that left us to about 50 to 55 mils total on this table, and our client decided to go with a charcoal smoky type of color that absolutely came out beautiful at the end of this project. Now, doing your first pour, you will see that most of your air bubbles will come up, and you can just use your flame gas gun to remove all your air bubbles from your epoxy table. And obviously repeating the same steps with all the other castings you do, unless you do a deep pour. But for this project we done a layer pouring system for this table. So this is the part where we lost some footage, but having the table back at our shop, we put it on a table with a very soft blanket at the bottom so you don't scratch your table. And we're starting off by sanding our table with our Festool Rotex machine, obviously in a Rotex mode. If you don't know, the Rotex mode on your Festool orbital sander is basically, it's a very aggressive sanding mode, and that's basically removing all the big marks the CNC machine made. And I can promise you now, investing in one of these machines is going to save you a lot of time. And we ultimately used our belt sander before, but we completely moved away from that because the belt sander is a very aggressive sanding method and it's leaving very deep lines and marks inside your epoxy. And as you can see here, the Rotex machine is obviously moving in orbital motion, and that's removing basically all the marks the CNC machine made on your epoxy table. And one of the questions I receive a lot is, do you repeat the same process at the back of your tables? Yes, obviously. The client is paying a lot of money for this table, so obviously you want to give them the absolute best table you can give them, and that's why we repeat the same process at both sides. Now, this is a very important step in building your epoxy table. We only sanded our table starting off with the 80 grit, then immediately moving to our Festool ETS5 sanding machine. Now this is a finishing sander. Now this is very important. If you're going to continue with any normal orbital sander, you will definitely get swirl marks on your epoxy table. Now this is where we invested in the Festool ETS sanding machine, and this is a finishing sander. Now that basically means that it's built for finishing your product, and as you can see, I am moving in lines to make sure that I sand my complete table. So after sanding my second layer with 100 grit sandpaper, this is in part 1 video where I mentioned always remember to build your mold and your table slightly bigger so you can cut your table to its final size later on. Now using my Festool track saw, this made the job absolutely easy by cutting my table to its final size. And obviously remember, your track saw will definitely not leave a smooth surface on the side of your table. And after cutting with your track saw, cutting the table to its final size, then we are going to continue sanding our table with our finishing sander to remove all the ugly marks the track saw made on the side of our tables. Now remember, this is still 100 grit sandpaper, and we're going to continue sanding with 100 grit sandpaper, then moving to 120 grit, and then moving to 180 grit sandpaper, 220 grit sandpaper, and then we're going to go to 320 grit sandpaper before we continue moving to the next step. So stopping at 320 grit, this is normally where we will start routering our table. Now using my Festool router, this thing is an absolute beast. I'm just giving my table a small chamfer, 45-degree chamfer, right around my table, on top and at the bottom. And I just want to point this out to you. Just check how incredibly good the dust extraction on this Festool machine is. It makes absolutely no dust, and it's sucking out all the epoxy particles that the router is making under the machine. So after we finished routering our table right around, we are going to move to the finishing stages of our epoxy table. Now we're moving on to a 400 grit sandpaper, then we're going to move on to a 600 grit sandpaper. And I just want to point something out. When you start sanding from your 400 grit sandpapers up, you need to make sure you use an airbrush all the time, using your orbital sander for about 20 seconds sanding, removing your sand pad from your table, and making sure you use an airbrush to remove all the small dust particles underneath your sander. Finishing off with 800 grit sandpaper, this is the most critical part of your sanding process, and we like to sand in a circular motion. And you will see I like to sand on the epoxy, but when I finish sanding, I will lift my sander up on the wood part of my table, and when I start sanding, I will start sanding on the wood section of my table, repeating the same process, sanding for about 20 to 25 seconds, and making sure the underside of your pad are always clean. And always remember, don't apply pressure on this step of your sanding process. I'm applying absolutely no pressure on my sander, and this will help you to remove most of your swirl marks on your table. The other question we also receive a lot is, how do we fasten our steel bases to the underside of our table? Well, we normally use threaded insets on all our tables, and I know you're judging me now because I haven't got a wood bit here. I use the steel bit, and I know the next step you're also going to judge me and must probably leave me a bad comment. Please don't do that. My countersink bit is lost, and I had this weird little file thing in my drawer I used to make a small countersink bit for the threaded inset, and you know what, this actually worked perfectly. After cutting your threaded inset hole, I'm just using my sander, using an airbrush to remove all the dust, and then applying my threaded inset into my hole, and you will see now this is absolutely sitting like a glove. So oiling our table, we are going to use Odis Oil Super Duper, and you need to make sure you shake it well before you use it. So we will start off with Super Duper. It's an oil that penetrates into the wood more than your normal original Odis oil. And I'm using a new brush pad, the white pad you see there. And starting off with a new pad, you will see that you will not get that far when you start using Odis oil until the pad soaks up most of the oil. Then you will see you will get much more spreading ratio on your surface where you're going to oil your epoxy table. And remember guys, it's now September 2021. In October our website will be live. And that basically means that I am currently busy with a document going into full detail on how to build epoxy tables from start to finish, every single thing you need to know on building these tables. I will obviously announce this on our social media platforms. I will leave a link down in the description where you can find us and where you will be able to download this document. And remember, before you go, I will leave a link down in the description of all the tools I use if you are interested. And remember guys, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our channel, like this video, it's honestly going to help us. Enjoy the video guys, I'll see you next week.